you've got at least 24 subpoenas I could name of high officials issued during the last 2 years, during the previous Congress. They have not been reissued. They've just been left hanging. They were just a pretense. Well, because of course they were asking the Justice Department to enforce the subpoenas. Right? Little known fact, Congress can enforce its own subpoenas.
Yeah, sure.
When I go to Capitol Hill and I say something they don't like, they'd have no shortage of police officers and no shortage of jail cells. And I highly recommend it. It's a very enjoyable experience and it can be used to great advantage. Don't be afraid of meeting the Capitol Police. But the point is that the Capitol Police exist and the Congress controls them and every committee controls them. And any committee in either house has the undisputed power used for the better part of American history, but not for the past 75 years, and justified by numerous Supreme Court rulings, at least previous Supreme Courts, to send the Capitol Police to seize anyone who does not comply with a subpoena and lock them up until they do. And not just show up and say, I do not recall, sir. I do not recall, sir. But testify to the satisfaction of the committee. And not to do so used to be taken as an affront to the dignity. The Congress was thought of as having dignity. And I mean, you read these old cases and a lot of it seems funny and comical and they just wanted somebody to come and apologize or they were going to have a duel or something, you know. But the point is they thought of themselves as having an interest in Congress as an institution, not just in their party, which can then align them with a different branch from the one they serve. And so forget about impeachment. Any committee in either house, just subpoena the guy and send the police to bring him in. And all of a sudden, Congress is going to be a branch of our government again. Here and then back there.
One question.
Yes?
Are we ever going to get our government back?
I'm not going to make a prediction, but I'm going to tell you it's entirely possible. And that I think there's a huge opening, among other things, in the fact that we have given a party that has claimed to represent us large majorities in both houses and the White House, and they've chosen not to do anything.
Yeah.
Now, that could result in misdirected strategies, in defeatism and crawling under beds, in electing Republicans, in just attacking them all, in trying to create a third party, or it could result in people becoming independent citizens, organizing independently of what the party tells them to do, and taking their demands to their representatives regardless of party. And if that happens, I think we have a chance. Back there in the light blue, and then everybody else.
My strategy, if I was Obama, and you mentioned it a couple times but haven't written about it a whole lot, but I would have defined this healthcare debate as class warfare and basically said, look, we're taking money from the rich and we're giving it to the rest of you, and that's my approach to the whole thing. And I think that kind of approach would help him on a whole lot of other issues, and I think there's historical precedent for it in FDR, and I just want to speak to that a little bit.
Well, I tend to agree with you. I don't know if I would use the phrase class warfare. I don't like wars or warfare. I think the general theme is right. I think taxing corporations and the extremely wealthy people who live off investments and don't work for a living is actually very popular. Even with Glenn Beck's readers, it's extremely popular, and it can be twisted in crazy directions, used to justify flat taxes and things that further benefit the rich. Or it could be used to say, there's no reason we can't all have health care in this incredibly wealthy country. Now, I would do that, and you would do that. Barack Obama, I think, would be highly unlikely to do that. This bill that they're working on largely is class warfare in the other direction. Yeah. It's largely a public bailout of insurance companies after we got done with the banks. Mm-hmm. And it may have some good pieces in there too. It may have some very good pieces in there, but that's a big chunk of what it is. But yes, that's what I would have liked to see. Again, not so much from the president, but from leaders in Congress, where I would like to see our legislation done. Yes, in the red, and then over here.
Well, there's been a few Blendtec references tonight. I have a list of the advertisers at Blendtec, radio, local, radio, and TV, that come and see me, and I'll give you the flyer, and if you can make some calls. We've already got the Ohio Lottery and the Ohio Health to pull their ads on the radio here in town. So a few calls.
You can follow the same campaign at Democrats.com too.
This is more on just the local, like the Columbus
local
area
show.
advertisers,
Okay. Local
not the
That's
national.
great.
But yeah, there is the Color of Change campaign. That's
Yes.
and then what if I think President Obama should have sent Democratic mayors and governors out pounding on podiums. If you can cut the healthcare costs in half, you know, for government workers, what a windfall that would be for our school districts and cities and states. Columbus here, I call it the city finance department. Our city workers, it costs $100 million, probably more now, to insure just our city workers. So that's a selling point to single payer. That would conserve taxpayer dollars.
I agree with you. We have to come up with these kind of messages and take them to our representatives.
And I called the dispatch lead political Joe Hallett, and I said, hey, I have an idea how you can, you know, not cut services or raise taxes, and it'd be, you know, a couple $100 million to the state every year. Well, you ought to be governor then. But once I say single payer, he's like, oh, whatever.
Well, you know, Tom Hartman, who's a great author and a great radio host, and who's kind enough to put a quote on the top of my front cover of my book, wrote an essay recently proposing, why not just expand Medicare, allowing people to buy into it, and have them buy in at exactly what it costs to serve them. It's revenue neutral. All of those arguments go away, and you just expand Medicare. Simple, makes sense, but obviously being simple and making sense is not winning the day here. So,
and I think, but I do think it's important if people call the mayor's office. Why aren't our mayors and our school board members saying we need single payer? They represent these districts. It would be in the best interest for our city.
There's a huge list of city councils that have passed resolutions saying we support HR 676 and single payer, and a huge list of local labor unions and even national labor unions. But the national representatives of which are going in the exact opposite direction and censoring that kind of talk. Let's take one more and then go to somebody else.
The mayor in our town doesn't want to get out there in front of that, just to make the point clear.
Get a good mayor. Over here in the blue and then over here.
What's your perspective of September 11th, 2001 and the possibility of a fair and honest investigation of the events on that day?
I would love to have one. I worked along with, as many people did, a congressman from Ohio named Dennis Kucinich, who was brave and creative enough to introduce 35 articles of impeachment, 3 of which dealt with that. We ought to have one. We haven't had one. There's no excuse, I can imagine, for not having one. There's a huge push now in New York City to demand one. Why shouldn't we? And as established beyond doubt and laid out well, I think, in those articles of impeachment, the president was criminal. The president was warned, did not act. And there's absolutely no excuse for it.
Could you talk a little bit about your opinion of the value or feasibility or lack thereof of either forming a third party or taking an existing alternative party and making it more important in our system?
Well, I think our system is so corrupted and stacked against that it's very, 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 very difficult without reforms that would permit it. And in most cases, they are the same kind of reforms that would also permit independent candidates to run. And, you know, I'm not strongly for or against getting new parties. You know, I'd like to fix the existing parties or get new parties. But I am strongly in favor of drastically reducing the power of parties, whatever parties they are, so that representatives are not loyal to anything other than their constituents.